What is up? And welcome back to another episode of the Wizards podcast. I'm your host, Greg Finberg. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Washington Wizards' narrow loss to the Chicago Bulls, a game that they led by 16 points, a game that I thought they would probably pull out to end this losing streak, a really competitive effort on the second night of a back-to-back. But I was wrong. They somehow yet again found a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. They found a way to maintain this losing streak, which, when we're at the draft lottery in May, you're going to look back and say this was an awesome loss. I'm glad they lost this game, especially with how bad the NBA has been. But again, this is another winnable game that, despite their tanking efforts, despite their intentions to lose a lot of games, despite the end goal of the season to be a bottom four team record wise, there's games that they should win. They should have beat the Hornets. They should have beat the Sixers. They should have beat the Pistons. And on a night like tonight, where they were in control for a better part of the game, they were up by 16 points at one point. They had multiple chances to win the game at the end. They couldn't get it done. Wizards fall 121 to 120 in Chicago. They are now 1-15 on the season. They have lost 14 games in a row, many of which they led by double figures, many of which they arguably should have won, and they didn't. And tonight was a perfect example of that. Had a couple of solid performances, again, in a competitive effort. Like, I thought Cam Whitmore was awesome. Corey Kispert looked great, filling in as a starter with Chris Middleton out. Trey Johnson missed this game as well. So did AJ Johnson. So did Marvin Bagley. So you were definitely down some guys, but got Alex Sarr back. Great performances, like I mentioned, from Corey and Cam, 20 points each for the two of them. And you had multiple chances down the stretch to win this game, and you couldn't pull it out. And I already know a lot of people are going to blame Brian Keefe, and we'll get into why he definitely deserves some of the blame. But again, this was another example of a roster that's bad by design, that's flawed by design. You saw that, in the final possessions when they needed a point guard to settle things down, and they didn't have that. You saw it at times where they were getting killed on the glass when Vukcevic was getting multiple possessions for the Bulls, and the Wizards seemingly didn't have much of an answer with Tristan Vukcevic filling in for Bagley. And again, the team found a way to lose. I want to take you to the final moments of the game because that's really what was important. Like the Chicago fought back. It's a game of runs. You couldn't expect the Wizards to maintain a 16-point lead for the entire second half. That just wasn't possible. Chicago made some runs. They cut it to one a couple times. The Wizards continued to maintain distance and went on their own runs to kind of keep it at arm's length. And then the Bulls sort of stormed back. Like I mentioned, 6:13 left. Wizards are up six. Bulls come back to take the lead with 4:51 remaining for their first lead in a while. Um, Close game down the stretch. Going back and forth, and with 3:41 remaining, Chicago takes a 4-point lead. Still a lot of time, but at that moment, Brian Keefe takes Cam Whitmore out of the game in favor of CJ McCollum. Whitmore finished with 20 points on 7 of 10 from the field, had a poster dunk in transition, was pretty unstoppable when he got downhill, made some tough shots, and played another night of efficient basketball with a couple rebounds here and there, some assists, moved the ball, was taking good quality shots while also not hogging the ball. Um, Arguably his best game as a Wizard. He continues to stack these good games, yet his head coach took him out for the final 3 minutes and 41 seconds of this game. He did it in favor of CJ McCollum, who wasn't awful tonight, but again, wasn't great. And then at the end, he decided with 6 seconds left and the Wizards trailing by a point that he was going to take. He was going to, instead of putting Cam Whitmore in the game, he put Bub Carrington in. And look, I'm sorry. Like, again, Bub Carrington wasn't like awful tonight. What do you do? 8 points on 3 of 9 from the field in 24 minutes, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 turnovers. Like, again, considering how bad his season has been, this was honestly, as sad as it sounds, one of his better games. But miss me with the minutes will be earned. Like, Brian Keefe before the season. Minutes will be earned, not given. Will Dawkins before the season. Minutes will be earned, not given this season. I'm sorry, but does it seem like Brian Keefe playing Bub Carrington over Cam Whitmore in that situation when you need a bucket with 6 seconds left is the definition of minutes being earned, not given. I mean, if you're Brian Keefe, you cannot sit in front of me and say definitively that Bub Carrington earned a shot to win the game with 6 seconds left in that lineup more than Cam Whitmore did. You can't. There's no argument for saying that Bub Carrington earned those minutes over Cam Whitmore. And on that final play, when we break it down, I don't think Cam Whitmore being in over Bub Carrington would have made much of a difference. I think Keyshawn George still turns it over there, regardless of who's standing over on the far wing, or I guess the short wing. But that's not the point. The point here is that they preach defense in the preseason. They are giving up 130 plus points per game through 16 games, which is dead last by a decent bit in the NBA. They have the worst defensive rating in the NBA. They can't get a defensive rebound. They can't guard their spot. They're in the wrong rotations. All of that after you preached a better defensive year. And then you come on in the beginning of the season and you say minutes will be earned, not given. And to this point, that is so far from the truth. You are giving minutes to guys that haven't played well, that don't deserve to be playing this many minutes. A lot of it's by design. Like, I get Middleton and McCollum, regardless if they're playing good or not, are going to probably start, and they're going to play big minutes. Like, they're trying to increase that value. I understand that. But it's 6 seconds left in the game. You need a bucket. Cam Whitmore is tied with Corey Kispert for your leading scorer. And you, the head coach, go, you know what? Bub Carrington should be in this game. He deserves these minutes. He's earned these minutes more than Cam Whitmore. I'm sorry, that's false. That's ridiculous. It was a dumb decision. Didn't affect the play, but it's the principle of you can't come out here and preach one thing and then do the exact opposite. There's no world in which Bub Carrington earned those minutes over Cam Whitmore. Cam Whitmore should have been in the game for the final 341, and he wasn't. And that is ridiculous, honestly. And that is to say that on that final play with 5 seconds left, or I guess 6 seconds left when they reset the clock, Keefe goes with a lineup of CJ McCollum, Keyshawn George, Alex Sarr, Bub Carrington, and he took out Bilal Coulibaly and Corey Kispert. Which again, it's fine. Like, Corey Kispert had 20 points. He was awesome. Started 5-5 from the field. His best game of the season. I understand the McCollum. He was a scoring option, inbound the ball. That's fine. Sarr had played pretty well. You need a big out there. That's fine. But I don't get the Bub Carrington thing. It doesn't make sense to me, especially over Whitmore. I thought Cam should have played a lot more down the stretch. Didn't. Which really didn't make too much sense to me. Like, again, Keefe waited until 2:30 left to put in Keyshawn George for Corey Kispert. Thought Keyshawn should have been inserted way earlier than that and just sat for most of Chicago's. Or I guess I'm looking at the wrong quarter, honestly. Yeah, that was the first quarter that I'm looking at for the George thing. So disregard that. But the point still stands that I thought, Keith's rotations at the end of the game didn't make much sense. You got 6 seconds left, though. Like, Chicago mounts this comeback. They take the lead. 119 to 118 with 57 seconds left. Bilal makes a layup with 37 seconds left. And then I want to take it to this. Like, the Wizards' next foul puts them in the bonus, right? With 37 seconds left, you're up by 1 point. Chicago sets a simple flare screen. They're trying to get a switch. And Champagnie's in the game, and he just shoves the guy to the ground, and Trey Jones makes both free throws to take the lead. Like, you didn't make them work for that, which I really didn't like. And I thought, that you can blame Keefe all you want. That's not on Keefe. That was a poor play, poor decision from Champagnie to be a little too aggressive and handsy there. Wizards full timeout. They come in. George creates separation for a mid-range shot and misses. That's fine. 29 seconds left. Still a big difference. And let's give credit to Brian Kiefer, honestly, because there was about a 5-second difference between game and shot clock. Wizards were down 1, and he didn't foul. As sad as it sounds, I feel like at this point you have to give him some applause because in the past, he told this guy to foul in a similar situation when he shouldn't have. So it's nice to see that Brian Keefe has learned that lesson that when there's a difference in game and shot clock in a one-possession game, you should not foul. Bonus points for the Wizards. They actually got a pretty good stop, like forced Kobe White into a contested three. He missed it barely. Sarr gets the rebound. 6.1 left, Wizards ball. I tweeted out like who would get this final shot. I assumed it was going to be George or CJ coming off some sort of down screen. It ended up being an inbounds pass from McCollum to George. They blitzed George. Really good play by Trey Jones. He lost the ball, regained possession, and then kind of panicked and tried to fumble it over to McCollum, who wasn't ready. Ball goes out of bounds. 1.3 left. Bulls ball. How you don't get up a shot there is ridiculous. And I know a lot of people are going to blame Brian Keefe here. And again, I don't think he's done a great job. And I've already talked about a lot of the things I didn't like that he did down the stretch. And there's more to come from that. But this was sort of a Keyshawn George mistake. And I thought he got fouled. He was really frustrated. Him and Keefe were screaming at the ref. It looked like he got hit on the hand by Trey Jones, and they didn't call it, unfortunately. We got to be strong with the ball there. Like, you get it inbounded to him. He gets blitzed, kind of panics a little bit, and loses the ball. I mean, again, should you have a 21-year-old forward in his second year being your primary ball handler, especially at the end of the game? Like, probably not if you're trying to win, but that's by design, you know? But I do think that Keith maybe could have put him in a better spot than sort of giving it to him running away from the basket. But you can't put too much of that on Keith. Again, I thought George just kind of panicked a little bit, and that's fine. You know, he'll be in that situation again, and hopefully he learns his lesson. But that's a really bad play. You almost got a 5-second violation, by the way, and to not get a shot up there is just it's really discouraging. If you're the head coach, no matter if George loses the ball or panics or not, it's ultimately on you to draw up a better play, to get a cleaner inbounds, to get him the ball in a more advantageous spot than that, and he didn't. So George loses the ball. There's still 1.3 seconds left. Bulls take a timeout. They're inbounding it right in front of the Wizards bench. So if they inbound it to the open court near their bench, that's where all the space is, right? So you would assume if you're the Wizards, you want to take that option away. What you don't want is for them to inbound the ball and be able to run away from you and run out the clock. You want to foul as quick as possible because at that point, the Wizards, I believe, didn't have any more timeouts. They realistically had to foul quick with about a second left. Hope that even if they made one or two, if it was a make, you could still throw the ball down floor and turn and shoot in a second. That's plenty of time. So that was the goal there. And instead of having the guy who's guarding the inbounds force the ball to the short side corner so that you can take away most of the court and still foul, the Wizards allowed the entire open side of the floor to remain open. And all the inbounder had to do was find Trey Jones, who caught the ball, ran away from the trailing defender, and the game was over. Again, that's on coaching. I wouldn't have even had anybody be guarding the inbounder, period. Like, who cares about the inbounder? You're trying to deny the ball, get a steal, or at the very least, get the ball in a spot where you are right there and you can foul immediately. That's the goal there. So again, for in that situation, the one thing you can't have happen, that falls again on coaching and not having the guys in the right spot. So I don't want to put too much of the blame on Keefe in terms of George's turnover. Like, I didn't think he put him in the best spot, but still, George has to be more strong with the ball. Even if they foul, you still got to play through it. So an unfortunate possession, but a lot of things just went wrong there. And again, I do think that Keefe deserves a lot of the blame. Like, why are you not playing Cam Whitmore, who's been the team's best offensive player all night alongside Kispert for the final 341, especially after that timeout? You're inserting Bub Carrington over Cam Whitmore. Are we serious with that? That makes no sense. If you're Brian Keefe, how do you defend that? And again, he probably wasn't asked at post game because I've been watching these recaps of the media. I'm pretty sure it's just Megan McPeak of Monumental and whatever other beat reporters want to be there. Like, I don't think that the typical Monumental guys are traveling on this road trip. I don't know if other beat reporters from like the Post or the Athletic are traveling either, because it was literally just a Q&A between Megan McPeak and Brian Keefe after the Raptors lost. So I doubt that he's really going to get asked about that, which sucks because I want to know what his actual explanation is. I think the good question would be, hey, coach, you said before the season minutes will be earned and not given. Yet it seems like you gave minutes to Bub Carrington, who had shot 3 for 9 to that point, over giving minutes to Cam Whitmore, who had 20 points on 70% from the field to that point. Explain that rationale to me. And I'd love for Brian Keefe to have to sit there and explain it. I doubt that's the case, but that would be my nagging question. I think it's a nagging question for most Wizards fans too. And it wasn't just that. Like throughout the game, throughout the season, the rotations have just been questionable to say the least. You have Will Riley, who I wouldn't even call rotational minutes. He played the final 3 minutes, I think, of the first half and didn't play after that. And that's a common theme. Like in the beginning of the season, Vukcevic would play the final couple minutes of the first half. You've seen Champagnie get those minutes at times. And then they don't play the entire second half. And it's like, how do you expect them to get better? How do you expect them to get a rhythm when all you're really doing here is just playing them to play them? There's not much rhythm. There's not much real planning that goes into it. It's just, oh, hey, here's some minutes we need to fill. Just, go in there and run some cardio. That didn't make much sense to me either. So a lot of questionable things throughout this losing streak. Tonight's decision to play Bub over Cam at times and to even take Cam out the final 4 minutes of this game, that's right up there with most of them. So certainly not my favorite decision, but when you take all of it out and you kind of take a step back, games like this in Chicago where you barely lose, but you're right there and probably gave yourself a chance or a real chance to win. Those are the games that fans and I think that this team wants to be in. I think the frustration is ballooned because it's the 14th straight loss. Like if 10 or 11 of these 14 losses were competitive efforts like tonight, like it was against Minnesota, fans would be fine. But when this is kind of few and far between these types of efforts on a 14-game slide, it gets harder and harder to defend it, to maintain your sanity, to maintain your backing and support of this rebuild when it's so rare, right, to have games like this. So in the grand scheme of things, it's a competitive loss. A lot of guys got some valuable reps. Whitmore has looked better each game. Torrey Kispert played his best game of the season with 20 points. You're still getting valuable on-ball reps for George, Sarr, getting some late-game minutes and a really good matchup against a great player in Vucevic. This team played very well tonight, and they were up 16. They very well could have won. They didn't. But if this is going to be the standard and games like this are going to be what unfolds, that's a much better look than when you lose by 30 to Toronto or when you lose by 23 to Brooklyn. So again, like you can't be too mad at the loss. Like it's crazy how bad teams in the league are. Like Sacramento won tonight. I think they have 4 wins. Brooklyn won the other night. They have 3 wins. New Orleans and Indiana, I believe, still have 2 wins, and the Wizards are the worst team with 1 win. Like if they rattle off 2 wins in a row, they're, despite being 1-15 now, kind of looking at maybe not being a bottom 4 team. And there's still 60 games left, but it just kind of shows like, yes, this sucks, but these losses are actually quite valuable. As much as that kind of sucks to say, it is in the better interest of this team to kind of keep losing these games. So again, a pretty tough effort for the Wizards here. They led by 16, like I mentioned, and I did a little bit of research when I was looking at some of the stats post game. This is the 6th time on this 14-game losing streak that the Wizards have led by double digits. I believe they led Philadelphia by 19, New York by 10, Charlotte by 13. They led Boston by 12, maybe. There's another team in there that they led by double digits. And then they led Chicago by 16 tonight. What do those games all have in common? The Wizards are 0-6. They lost them all. No matter how big the lead over this 14-game losing streak, they lost the game. So again, those are realistically games they should be winning, and not all of them, right? It's like, teams all the time have big leads in games and blow them. That happens a couple times for each team throughout a season. Basketball is a game of runs, but when it happens 6 times in 14 games and you've lost all 6 of those games, and in total all 14 of those games, it becomes something where it's a real problem. It's a real problem that Brian Keefe seemingly can't make those adjustments, those key adjustments late in games to pull them out. He seemingly can't halt these runs when opponents are just chipping away and chipping away and chipping away before they take the lead and don't give it back. It's a common theme throughout the season to where this team can't finish. And it's the reason they're the worst team in the league. So definitely some questionable decisions. The decision to not play Whitmore is at the forefront, especially considering Bub Carrington played for him late in the game when you needed a bucket. Still doesn't make sense to me. Will Riley getting 3 minutes randomly in the second quarter and not appearing after that didn't make much sense to me. Um, a lot of the rotations from Keefe still baffle me. Like Champagnie, on any given night, can get a DMP, can play 20 plus minutes as a starter or off the bench, can play 4 minutes in the second quarter and not appear, or can go back to being a DMP. Like it's just so many different things where you got to find something. I know you've had injuries, but still, it's like a lot of these guys are just like, am I going to play tonight 20 minutes or am I just not going to play? Like at this point, 16 games in the season, you shouldn't have that, and they do. So again, like another pretty tough loss, another loss that I thought that they could have won, outscored by 7 in the fourth quarter when it mattered, and they can't pull out what would have been a pretty good road win against the solid Bulls team. Um, they couldn't get it done. Wizards fall to 1-15. They have now lost 14 straight games. Their next game is at home. They end this 3-game road trip 0-3, losses to Minnesota, Toronto, and Chicago. They return home to face the Atlanta Hawks, who have been playing a lot better basketball as of late. That's on Tuesday. And then they have a couple days before their game at Indiana. I think it's an NBA Cup game, actually, on Friday. So not only can they snap the slide at 15, but they can also win their first NBA Cup game. They're actually the only team that's 0-10 and never won an NBA Cup game. And if they lose those games, then they're at 16. That would tie the franchise record with a chance to maybe break that record on not this Monday, but the coming Monday, December 1st, against the Milwaukee Bucks. So again, that's probably going to do it for a recap of another pretty tough loss for the Wizards, a competitive loss and kind of a loss that is okay within the grand scheme of this rebuild. But again, when you're up double digits, especially 16 points on the road, you're playing well, you got to pull out some of these games. At least you should be able to. And this team seemingly is unequipped to do that. So that's going to do it for this episode. Wizards fall 121 to 120 to the Chicago Bulls. They have now lost 14 in a row. They are 1-15, which is dead last in the NBA. They'll look to get back on the winning slide against Atlanta, which I doubt will happen. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for listening. Go Wiz.